I, 30 female, grew up in a blended family. My mom married my stepdad when I was 12, and that's when I met my stepsister Jenna, 28 female. Jenna and I were never close. While I was more introverted and focused on academics, Jenna was the social butterfly, always surrounded by friends and basking in the spotlight. Despite our differences, we managed to get along most of the time, mainly for the sake of our parents. We both worked at our family business, a successful chain of bakeries started by my stepdad. My stepdad was always clear that Jenna, being his biological daughter, would take over when he retired. I didn't mind much because I loved baking and was more interested in the creative side of the business than the management. Besides, my dream was to start a family with my fiance, Mike, 32 male, and I was looking forward to that future. I met Mike in college, and we hit it off instantly. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely in love with me. We dated for 4 years and were engaged for another 2. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. About a year ago, I started noticing Mike acting weird, being distant, secretive with his phone, and making lame excuses to avoid spending time with me. I chalked it up to pre-wedding jitters, but deep down, I knew something was off. One day, I decided to surprise Mike at his apartment with his favorite homemade cookies. I used my spare key to let myself in, and that's when I heard laughter. My heart sank. I quietly walked into the living room. There they were, Jenna and Mike, sitting on the sofa, Jenna only in her underwear. I was devastated. I felt the biggest pain I've ever felt before. They were shocked to see me. Mike looked guilty, but Jenna looked defiant. She claimed they were meant to be, and that they are in love, and she is sorry I had to find out this way. Her words felt like a slap in the face. I ended things with Mike on the spot and moved out of the apartment we shared. I couldn't believe the 2 people I trusted the most had betrayed me so deeply. I tried to move on, focusing on work and spending time with supportive friends. But it wasn't easy, especially when a few months after the breakup, Jenna sent me an ultrasound picture with a message. Guess who's going to be a mommy? She knew about my struggles with infertility, and this was her way of twisting the knife. I was shattered, but I decided to cut her and Mike out of my life completely. The pain of knowing I might never have children of my own, while my stepsister carried my ex-fiance's baby, was almost unbearable. I threw myself into my work, hoping to distract myself from the constant ache in my heart. It was around this time that I started taking on more responsibilities at the bakery, gradually becoming an integral part of the business. Jenna and Mike, on the other hand, continued to live their best lives, at least on the surface. Their social media was filled with pictures of lavish vacations, fancy dinners, and extravagant gifts. Jenna loved to flaunt their lifestyle, always posting about the latest luxury they indulged in. It seemed like they were living a fairy tale. A year later, tragedy struck our family. My stepdad passed away unexpectedly. In his will, he left everything to my mom, with the condition that she would pass it on to Jenna and me after she passed away. This meant that eventually, Jenna and I would be joint owners of the family business. My mom, who had always been my biggest supporter, took over the management. However, seeing how deeply Jenna and Mike's betrayal had affected me, my mom made a bold decision. She decided to gift the business to me entirely. "Jenna doesn't deserve it after what she did to you," she said. My mom transferred the ownership to me, effectively making me the sole owner of the business. Jenna was furious, but there was nothing she could do. My mom's decision was final, and Jenna couldn't do anything, as stepfather's condition was only expressed in words. Then virus hit, and Mike's business took a massive hit, eventually going bust. Instead of adjusting their lifestyle, Mike used all of his savings to maintain the lavish lifestyle Jenna loved. They quickly burned through money, and once their glamorous life crumbled, they were left with mounting debts and no income, while the bakery was doing better than ever as we started doing online orders and home delivery. To my biggest shock, one day, Jenna showed up at my office. She begged me to give Mike a job. She was begging for forgiveness and saying sorry for what she did to me. She said I need to think about her baby and that if I don't give Mike a job, they're going to end up on the street. Here was the woman who had stolen my fiance and rubbed her pregnancy in my face, now begging for my help. I told her that Mike had to apply like everyone else and that I wouldn't guarantee him anything. The look on her face was priceless. She started shouting that it was her father's business and that she has the right to it, and that my mother was a bee for what she did to her by gifting it to me. Well, I said I'm sorry, but such is life, and showed her the door. She left fuming. I know she called my mother asking her to step in and ask me to reconsider hiring Mike. My mother says I should reconsider, as she feels guilty that she gifted the business entirely to me and thinks Jenna has a right to it, so I could at least hire Mike. So am I the a-hole for not hiring Mike? Not the a-hole. Absolutely not the a-hole. You don't owe either of them anything after what they did to you. Your stepsister and ex-fiance got exactly what they deserved. Good on you for standing your ground and not giving in to their manipulative tactics. Not the a-hole. The audacity of them to even ask you for help is mind-blowing. They betrayed you in the worst possible way, and now they're facing the consequences. You don't need that kind of toxic energy around. Not the a-hole. Sometimes tough love is necessary. They need to understand that their actions have long-term consequences. You've done the right thing by focusing on your own well-being and success. Stay strong. So, in 2005, my mother suddenly passed away at 68 years old after some delayed complications of an elective surgery. Of 4 brothers and 2 sisters, everyone except brother managed to make it to the funeral. This mostly goes down as preparations are being made for the funeral. My mother had a life insurance policy, not enough to make anyone rich by any means, but she made sure there was money there in the event of her passing, $8,000 USD. No one but her relied on her income, so there wasn't really any need for something extravagant. My mother has listed me as the beneficiary of her life insurance, which is important for the story. There's a couple of us who would be considered low income, but at least 3 of us, while not rich, will probably never worry about how they are going to pay for a bill, or even a funeral, for the rest of their life. I fell somewhere in between. I made decent money and such, but I was not independently wealthy. My mother lived a pretty hard life up until 10 years before her death. Born in eastern Kentucky in the 30s, raising 7 kids on a waitress wage, difficult marriages. Yet she always had good food on the table 3 times a day. We were always cared for, and even our Christmas time was awesome. I still remember a year from my childhood that the corner of our living room looked like a postcard with presents stacked floor to ceiling. The point here is that she always put her kids first, and even in her passing, she made sure no one would have to take on a burden to bury her. I am the baby of the family, being born a number of years after my next sibling. Therefore, I was the last to move out, and always being nearby, I was way closer to her than any of my siblings in the later years of her life. I was usually the one who would take her out to dinner or buy her something nice as a gift. On her 68th birthday, in the year of her passing, I, and my girlfriend at the time, was the only one who celebrated her birthday with her. A cake that said 18, because I always told her that when she turned 50, she got to start over, and we joked on that day that she was legal again. Not one of the other 2 that were local even stopped by, and none of the rest even called. The closeness is important because that led me to being listed as the beneficiary on her insurance, as well as an insight to her opinion on the other children. She loved her kids, but facts are facts, and she could recognize them. One sister, we'll call her B, had become known as 2-week B, because if she borrowed anything and had it more than 2 weeks, you were never going to see it again. And my mother saw this in my sister, and she and I would talk about such things. B, of course, was one who wasn't on the poor end of the economy, so she had no monetary reason to be that way. B will be the focus of most of the rest of this, as she really is the CB here. Mom, as I called her, always told me that I was the beneficiary of her insurance because she didn't trust anyone else. Locally, there was me, B, and one of the brothers, to be responsible enough to do the right thing with the money. She also told me, if I ever die, you go in the bedroom and in the top right drawer is insurance information. She also never said that without also adding, you take that money and you bury me. You do not spend a dime more than it takes to put me in the ground. You take the rest and you go on vacation, or put it on a new car, or something, but you do not waste it on me. She was adamant that I be frugal with her funeral and keep the rest. My mother, always looking out for her kids. So she passes, and I find the insurance information, and I give the insurance company a call, and they tell me about the $8,000, and that I need to get them the death certificate, blah blah blah. So the family gets together before going to arrange the funeral and pick out the casket, and I ignore the words my mother told me time and time again. I say, Mom's insurance is $8,000. That's your budget. I emphasize that $8,000 should be more than enough and to not go over. I did not allocate some small portion, nor limit them in any other way. What I did do is go against my mother's wishes, and maybe in hindsight, I shouldn't have. But for me, I did the right thing. It was for my mother. Unfortunately, I did not get to help pick out the funeral arrangements, as by this time, I had been up 48 hours because one of my brothers busted a wheel bearing on his vehicle during his trip from 10 hours away, and I had to go a few hundred miles in each direction in the middle of the night with a U-Haul pull-behind trailer to get him and his family. That, combined with spending long hours in the hospital before she passed, had kept me awake long past exhaustion. So I told the family that I trusted their decision and to make it nice and re-emphasized the budget. I proceeded to pass out for a few hours. So the family has returned from the funeral home and has picked out a nice spot in a decent cemetery. My mother's favorite color was pink, so there was a nice pink casket picked out with great decorations and nice flowers. It was all very lovely, of course. Honestly, it was very fitting for my mother. It wasn't, however, what my mother told me to do. I recall her saying something along the lines of, "If you could throw me in a pine box and bury me in the backyard, that'd be enough." Silly, but I really think she was serious. She grew up in eastern Kentucky, and that's basically what many did there in the 30s. Everything was great until B says, "We went over budget. We divided the rest up and you owe us $400. Of course, I was like, "Excuse me?" And she reiterated what she said. I said, "No, I just gave you $8,000 and told you not to go over." She then ranted about how that money was Mom's insurance and that I hadn't given her anything. If you, like her, do not know how life insurance works, the money becomes the sole property of the beneficiary, and that person has no legal responsibility to pay for anything, funeral, debts, or anything. The $8,000 legally belonged to me and no one else, and I chose against my mother's wishes to spend 100% of that money on her funeral. I did not go on vacation or buy a new car. That just didn't feel right to me. We decided this could be discussed after the funeral, but I knew that there was nothing to discuss. I provided $8,000 with a directive to not overspend. This funeral could have cost everyone exactly $0, and it was not me who spent $2,800 too much, with the expectation that the rest cough up the difference. And really, if they had spent $4,000, I would probably divided the remaining cash up evenly among us. So after the funeral, there was a matter of Mom's stuff, all her belongings and things. People turned to me to ask what they could have. I didn't feel I was the one to determine that, so I basically told everyone, "I only want the photo albums, and what you can agree between yourselves, then go for it." When everyone was done, almost everything substantial was still there. People wanted specific photos of certain sentimental items, but many being long distance, they did not have a capacity to take such big items. I did get those photo albums, and I also specifically ended up with a billiards cue stick that my mother had since I was a kid. She was a bit of a pro at billiards, having played in seasonal play and tournaments, and even had a trophy showing a near-perfect .995 average for one season. All the other items my mother had now had to be dealt with. It was me who packed everything, me who loaded it into a truck, and me who moved it across town and put it into a storage unit. And it was me who paid the $100 a month to store it. So, weeks after the funeral, B brings up the money you owe me. This did not end well on that front, but at the same time, it didn't seem to hinder our brother-sister relationship either. Life went on, and we remained close, and still just brother and sister. Work was drying up where we lived, so I moved to another city. And as luck would have it, or bad luck, I ended up on temporary disability there. And as more bad luck would have it, my disability insurance refused to pay my doctor-asserted claims. I reached out to B, who was financially able and was close to the storage, to ask if she could pick up the tab on the storage unit until I get off disability and could return to work, and earning some paychecks, and that I'd pay it all back to her. I had been paying this storage for about a year at this point, and when I moved, I added some of my own stuff to it because there was room, and I had planned to drag the rest along with me as I returned to the area for visits. B told me that their money was tight, and that they couldn't help me out at all. She seemed to have no concern that most of the stuff in there belonged to her mother too. But she definitely had other plans. I tried to arrange with the storage company, sending what I could when I had it, but I was literally living off 88-cent banquet TV dinners on a daily basis, just to eat. B didn't seem to care about that either. And honestly, I'm not the type to ask others to feed, clothe, or house me anyway. I was fortunate that the job I had taken, and working when I went on disability from, was willing to front my rent and electric bill based on future work, a loan which I paid back entirely. But my mother's belongings had value to me, to all of us, but apparently not to B, or at least it seemed that way. When I couldn't pay any longer on the storage, I told B that I guess they were just going to take all the stuff and auction it off. I was a few months behind on payments at this point, and they were no longer willing to accept smaller amounts on whatever schedule I could muster. She gave me a guilt trip about how could you let this happen and all that, and it was a huge blow-up. But again, we remained close, as brother and sister. About 3 years later, my sister was visiting. I remember sitting on the front porch, she and I, and the storage unit came up. She was so heartfelt about it. She said, "Those were just things. They can be replaced." And I told her that they were mostly mom's things, and that cannot be replaced. She went on about how things are just things and all that, and that everything will be fine with time. So 1 more year passes. 2012 or so comes along, and I get a call from a different relative asking if I wanted some documents, birth certificates and such, that they came across. I was like, "What do you mean, came across?" They were vague at first, but after I was adamant that those documents could have come from the storage unit, they came clean. They told me that B had all my stuff, and all my mother's stuff, and she was having a great big yard sale on her front lawn right at this moment. They had come across a box of documents when going through the items in storage, and felt that I should have them, since they couldn't sell them anyway. B, the one who couldn't help, the one who told me that they were just things. She was having a grand old time making money in her fancy little yard sale. I called B and she told me I didn't deserve those things, owed $400 for mom's funeral, and it was going to get paid one way or another. She refused to budge. I was a 10-hour drive away. It was a huge argument, and I told her to never contact me again. After speaking to the storage unit, which I thought had auctioned the stuff long ago, they tell me that right after they spoke to me last, that she stopped by and convinced them that she would be taking over the unit and making the payments. They knew who she was and that she was my sister, small town. Apparently, she caught the payments up and had been making regular payments all that time until she decided to cash in. I had long resumed work and could have paid her back anything she was out of pocket had she just assisted me a few months while I was on disability. After all, I was asking her to help pay for storage on items that belonged to her dead mother. Her plan was much more sinister. I haven't spoken with her since that day, and probably never will. And I guess B got the photo albums too, I suppose. They were, after all, in that storage unit. Quite honestly, you could go after the storage company for letting her have the stuff. If your name was the only one on the contract, then letting her have it without your signature is illegal. Doesn't matter who she is. Doesn't matter that she brought the storage payments up to date. Giving her access was illegal. Had they let it go to auction and she bought it out right there, that would be a different story. Something you might think about looking into. Disown toxic so-called sister. I wish you should sue against her for theft without your own permission. I am very sorry that's what's happened to you. Shame on her. This happened over 5 years ago. My boyfriend's cousin is the typical entitled Karen. Nothing anyone ever does for her is good enough. But back then, she, EC, and my boyfriend, D, were at least on speaking terms. At the time, D's entire extended family was gathered at his parents' place. EC's birthday was approaching. She put on her sickeningly sweet smile and asked him what he was getting her. D's career had recently taken off, and he was feeling generous, so he asked her what she wanted. Without hesitation, the cousin asked for a pair of platinum earrings. D was a bit surprised, but agreed. That evening, he took her to a jewelry store. EC picked out a pair of sapphire-studded earrings, along with a nice pair of cufflinks. D asked what she was doing, as he had only agreed to buy her earrings. EC had the nerve to get irritated and told him she needed something for her husband as their anniversary was in a few weeks. D's first instinct was to chew her out right there, but then he had a better idea. He paid for the things and drove them back to his parents' place where, to cousin's horror, he gave the earrings to his sister and announced that he had bought himself a nice pair of cufflinks. When cousin became upset and whined to everyone that Dee lied to her and that she felt cheated and embarrassed, Dee told the family what she tried to pull. Dee's parents and other relatives sided with him and told cousin that she's the one who tried to trick him. EC's parents looked upset, but didn't have the guts to defend their daughter's actions. And every time he wears the cufflinks, he calls his hands the bringers of justice. Family members are the worst CBs ever. They think because they're family that they're entitled to anything and everything for free: money, personal items, and more. And how dare you ask to be repaid? But we're family. I shouldn't have to pay you back, is their rallying cry. I have a general rule. If someone expects something from you, they no longer deserve to have it. This is because if they have an expectation, they cannot simultaneously feel gratitude for your generosity. Why would they? They expected it of you. They felt entitled to it. This definitely goes for gifts. Another example is holding the door for completely able-bodied people. They're not simply entitled to the gesture. Rather, they should be grateful for the kind gesture. I'm aware there are exceptions to this rule, e.g., a child has every right to expect a parent to take care of them and buy them the things they need, but only up to a certain age. However, this entitlement does not extend to things like gifts, where gratitude is the appropriate behavior.